Today I'm talking about one of my favorite activities, masturbation. Now that I got your attention, what we're here to discuss is the bizarre history of Western culture and self-pleasure. Now, some civilizations were cool with it. The ancient Greeks had no qualms with a little tug or a rub. The Egyptian pharaohs even had the duty of annually masturbating into the Nile River to bring fertility to the land. Problems don't really start until the major religions get involved. See, onania was the proper term back in the day. It comes from Genesis 38, where a man, Onan, spills his seed on the ground, for which God smites him. So, plain and clear, the Old Testament wasn't crazy about it. But things don't really kick off for the religious crusade against masturbation until 1758, when a pamphlet entitled Onania, or the Heinous Sin of Self-Pollution, was anonymously published. It was here that masturbation first started being talked about as a disease, and one that could lead to insanity. This pamphlet was either the work of or inspiration for Samuel Tissot, who believed semen was an essential oil, and loss of which would reduce strength, weaken your organs, and blur your vision. The hypothesis that self-pollution caused insanity, neuroses, and epilepsy among other issues continued well into the 19th century. In fact, in 1850, it seemed that masturbation was enemy number one. As a medical journal put it, neither plague, nor war, nor smallpox, nor crowd of similar evils have resulted more disastrously for humanity than the habit of masturbation. It is destroying the element of civilized society. Which brings us to John Kellogg. Yes, the creator of cornflakes. I originally was going to pull from a lot of different sources until I started reading his book, Plain Facts for Old and Young, released as a second edition in 1879. The book is filled with such mind-boggling statements that I just had to share them, so strap in. John Kellogg was a staunch advocator of abstinence. He bragged that never once, not in his 40 years of marriage, did he ever sleep with his wife. He believed women needed to stop having sex after 45 and men after the age of 50 to avoid shortening their lifespan. And if a married couple did have sex, not for the purpose of a baby, but due to lust, then the child they spawned would certainly be doomed to become a prostitute. The man had his hang-ups. He believed man by nature was depraved. His appetites, his tastes, his habits, even his bodily functions are perverted. And the worst thing these little perverts could do was masturbate. It was a sin against nature, with no parallel except sodomy. See, masturbation wouldn't just condemn you to hell, it would ruin lives. So self-polluters needed to be sought out and fixed, a job he delegated to parents, as it was imperative this disease was cured at a young age before any irreparable damage was done. You might be thinking it'd be hard to tell, though, who's masturbating, but luckily Kellogg left us with a list of symptoms to be on the lookout for, to tell if your child is a secret vicer. Symptoms of masturbating include weakness, forgetfulness, paleness, cough, sleeplessness, depression, irritability, emaciation, an unpleasing character, soreness of the lungs, being easily frightened, lack of growth, pain in the limbs and stiff joints, moist hands, acne, wetting the bed, fondness for obscene stories, diminished senses, hence the going blind myth, eating clay or chalk. Now I feel I need to reiterate, these are symptoms of masturbating. Okay, let's go on. Forgetfulness, an unusual walk, a love of spices, and a disgust for bland food, untrustworthiness, dull or vacant eyes, stupidity, paralysis in the lower extremities, shrinking testes or breasts, and insanity, for which Kellogg says masturbation is the most common cause of. Now, if you notice any of these symptoms in your child, confront them, and get them to come clean. But if your little diddler insists on denying that they are self-polluting, then, and this is very important, Kellogg says you gotta catch them in the act. Perhaps they like to walk to secluded spots, in which case follow them secretly and spy on them. Or if you suspect they're doing it at night, at bedtime sneak into their room and quickly throw back the bedsheets. What you find under the covers will determine their guilt. Now, I don't want to give any bad advice, so I'll just quote Kellogg directly here. If, in the case of a boy, the penis is found in a state of erection with the hands near the genitals, he may certainly be treated as a masturbator without any error. If the same course is pursued with a girl, the clitoris will be found to be congested and will also be moist from increased secretion. Now, if you've done your parental duties, your child will have been ousted as a sinner, and you will need to figure out how to handle your little masturbator. As early as possible, try to instill them with a sense of fear of their own genitals. Try to paint as vivid a picture as you can of the horrors that will come from their sinning. See, if they keep on this path, the mere proximity to a mate, or the thought of one, will be sufficient enough to produce a pollution, and after a time the organs will become so diseased and irritable that the slightest mechanical irritation, such as the friction of clothing, the posture of sitting, or the riding of horseback, will produce a discharge. But it doesn't stop there. See, the end stages of this disease for men will result in spermatorrhea, then impotence with continued uncontrolled ejaculations, and finally, quite possibly, wasting away and dying. For women, their breasts will atrophy, they'll become sterile, and then certainly go insane. Hence hysteria, which for those of you who don't know, is derived from the medical root hyster, which means uterus. And if by some sad twist of fate, the self-polluters somehow manage to have a child of their own, well, their offspring is going to be puny, decrepit, and likely an idiot. Now, you should tell your child all of this, but Kellogg knows that scare tactics on their own will not be enough, because your child is likely already exhibiting untrustworthiness and idiocy. So, don't leave them alone at any time. They should be so carefully surrounded by vigilance that they cannot possibly transgress without detection. You should also give them exhausting work every minute of the day, because idleness and energy lead to sin. If after all this you still suspect them of jerking it, Kellogg found that tying their hands together was successful in some cases. But, there's the problem that they still could end up rubbing up against the furniture. So, when in doubt, Kellogg documented that covering the organs with a cage has been practiced with entire success. But, it just seems a little labor-intensive, right? Locking, unlocking, it's just a lot of work. So Kellogg does present some excellent permanent alternatives. For the ladies, pour carbolic acid on the clitoris of the little girls who are found to be touching themselves inappropriately. And for the boys, a simple non-invasive surgery. Take the foreskin and pull it over the head of the penis. Then, take a silver wire and sew it shut, as to stop it from receding. Now they can't have erections at all without ripping their foreskin off. Or you could just hope that circumcision, without any anesthetic, scars their mind with enough pain to end their addiction. Tough choices, but nobody ever said being a parent was easy. Once the physical act has been stopped, there's still the issue of the mind. See, Kellogg preached mental chastity, stating, "Indeed, this adultery of the mind is the beginning of immeasurable evil to the human family." Now, in the daytime, we and our children may be able to control our thoughts, but at nighttime, dreams pose a problem for some of us, and Kellogg called these perverts the filthy dreamers. However, there is hope for the filthy dreamers. See, Kellogg was adamant that this could be solved, and pointed to one man who found a cure. He found that a successful technique was to repeatedly enforce that any mental image of a woman, or a man if that's what you're into, means danger. That way, when one pops up in your dreams, you awaken in a state of terror, protecting you and your mind from adultery. Kellogg was pretty thorough in his writing, and was sure to include real-life accounts for any skeptical parents out there. After all, this was a disease often worse than death. As Kellogg put it, if a boy should be deprived of both hands and feet and should lose his eyesight, he would still be infinitely better off than the boy who gives himself up to the gratification of lust in secret vice. In one account, he tells of a desperate couple who came to him seeking advice about their son, whose thoughts were disordered. They were positive he wasn't self-polluting because they watched him like a hawk, but Kellogg knew masturbation had to be the culprit, so he had them leave the boy in his care, and sure enough, one of the nurses caught him masturbating. Kellogg would document, "Once a bright boy, kind, affectionate, active, intelligent, the pride of a loving mother and a doting father, his mind had sunken to a driveling idiocy. His vacant stare and expressionless countenance betokened almost complete imbecility. If allowed to do so, he would remain for hours in whatever position his last movement left him. If his hand was raised, it remained extended until placed in a position of rest by his attendant. Only with the utmost difficulty could he be made to rise in the morning, to eat, to drink, or walk. Only by great efforts could he be aroused from his lethargy sufficiently to answer the most simple questions." And Kellogg did not spare accounts of female polluters either. Based upon the fact that all girls want to be beautiful, Kellogg figured they should be especially pious, as this disease will make you ugly. He wrote of one lovely 20-year-old who fell victim to this disease. Her face, once fair and comely, had become actually haggard with vice. Purity, innocence, grace, and modesty were no longer visible there. The hard lines of sin had obliterated every trace of beauty and produced a most repulsive countenance. The damages of this disease destroy not only the child, but the family. One father, when he found out his daughter was a victim of this vice, stated he would rather see her in the grave than for her to keep on going this way. Kellogg was so disturbed by the effects of this disease that when he noticed some nurses cradling the genitals of babies in order to calm them, he stated that perhaps it would be better for the nurses to just slice the child's throat right then and there. Perhaps a naive child is not the sinner, though. Perhaps the sinner is none other than you. What can be done to spare you from a horrific fate? Well, that's where the cornflakes come in. See, seasoned food is exciting. Condiments, eggs, tea, coffee, chocolate, and all stimulants have a powerful influence directly upon the reproductive organs. They increase the local supply of blood, and through nervous sympathy with the brain, the passions are aroused. You want to stick to bland foods, like cornflakes, and you'll be taking a step in the right direction. Constipation and foreskins also prove to be slippery slopes into sin. Constipation descends the colon, exciting the reproductive organs. For this reason, frequent enemas are suggested. Foreskins can accumulate smegma, leading to irritation and touching of the genitals, and any touching is treading on dangerous ground. That's why some Hasidic Jews wear underwear that lets them urinate without touching themselves. But Kellogg's solution is much simpler. Just get a circumcision, and of course, don't use anesthetic. Now, if the addiction persists, try sticking a sound up your urethra 2 to 3 times a week. This can be made even more effective by sending an electrical volt through the sound, but this will need to be done by a professional. A few last tips are to splash cold water on your genitals and avoid feather beds. As much fun as I had exploring Kellogg's insanity, I honestly didn't set out to make a video on him. I was actually gathering research for a theory about how the cultural feelings towards masturbation helped create the incel. So this is just part 1. I'm laying down the history, and in the next video I'll get to the meat of it.